Three, two, one. Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have me a very special guest, Rob Leigh. Rob, how are you doing today?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Oh, excellent, excellent. I people on here know I love when I'm just like taking a break, on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, and I find somebody's book and Pathlighter. I was like, wait a minute. And I went right back up and I was like, I just knew I was like, this is going to be, my type of book. And yeah, I went to your blurb and, everything. And I was like, yep, definitely. And I can't remember if I bought it right away or pre-ordered it right away. I don't remember, but I was just like, yeah, this is for me. Like I said before we started recording, I started reading last night a bit. I probably shouldn't have because now it's messing up my TBR because as soon as I got in, I was like, oh man, Rob writes how I like, and could already tell, as a writer that there's certain things that I'm really going to enjoy. So thank you already for blowing up my TBR for 2024.
Well,
But
thank
yeah,
you. I
thanks for coming
appreciate
on
it.
today. For sure. We're gonna get started right away with that first question there for you, Rob. What has your writing journey been like up until this point?
So, um, I started writing a lot more when I was actually a long time ago in middle school, and sort of developed the idea for this, especially after picking up stuff like Percy Jackson and the Olympians
Oh,
and Lord of the Rings, and um, even Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. There was like a younger kids version of the book where it, took out kind of the Victorian or Gothic language and just made it a little easier to understand.
mhm.
I think that really fueled a lot of my it fueled a lot of my desire to tell stories of my own. I really liked the Greek mythology angle as well. And so throughout that time, I just started writing stories, kind of came up with my own versions of Greek myths, and then eventually the idea for Pathlighter formed. And so it started out something that was a lot more YA, and I kind of left it by on the shelf. Life took a front seat for most of the time when I went into high school and then college, and then after college, got into looking for a job and getting settled and everything like that. Then the pandemic hit, and was kind of looking for things to do. Remembered that I had this, and remembered that I, always kind of wanted to put a book out there, but really never found the time or the resources or anything like that. And so went through it, saw what worked, saw what didn't, kind of rewrote the whole thing. And then at the end of it, I just found myself with this really big manuscript and kind of sat there wondering what to do with it. So, um, did a lot of research on editing and cover art and how to market it and everything. And, you know, about a year and a half after that, book released, and now here we are 2 months later, and it's been a whirlwind. Still learning a lot, still still finding my footing, but it's been a great experience so far.
Oh, that's awesome. Mary Shelley, first of all, as soon as I read
Mhm.
Frankenstein in high school, I was just like, that like completely changed books for me. I feel like I didn't like horror before that or anything like that. And
Mhm.
then I was like, oh man, these are like really cool elements. So I definitely get you there. And then reading things like, oh, like Macbeth, with the witches and everything at the start.
Mhm.
Oh, sorry, not supposed to say them, their names and stuff. But it's just to me, it was just, had a whole new aspect. So I definitely feel you
Yeah.
there. Definitely early writing roots there. So
Yeah, I think that there's something that's so primal about Frankenstein.
hmm
And Mary Shelley does such a great job. I'm sure she took a lot of inspiration from a lot of Greek tragedy, because
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
that's what I got in reading that as well. Is that despite everything of his intentions being good, and despite everything he did to try and fix his mistakes, he still had this hubris. He still had this pride in himself, thinking that he really couldn't do anything wrong, and all of his solutions to things were band-aid solutions.
Yeah,
Um, and by the time he realized how wrong he was, it was too late. And,
yeah.
also saw that the monster took on a lot of those personality traits, and so at the end they were like, "Oh, this is really horrible because of how it's affecting me," and that's not the way that likable people behave.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think that is also a trait in a lot of Greek tragedies where the hero has a lot of hubris, and they don't fully understand the consequences of their actions outside of how it affects them.
Yeah, yeah.
And that makes a lot of interesting character moments.
No, totally. Yeah, you can definitely tell, like, she was well read and what she was well read in. It was so funny because years ago, I feel like people are like, oh yeah, Lord Byron, he probably did a lot of that. And then now we're like, yeah, no, like not a lot of things that he wrote were like that. No, that was just Mary Shelley. And then I think a couple people found, some primary sources that people were um talking, about her coming up with these ideas and doing things. So I'm just glad lately that she's getting credit that she deserves. I mean, she
Yeah.
really, well, like
Mhm.
birthed a lot of the stuff that we do, in terms of fantasy, sci-fi, and horror. So, and she had all three in there. So to me, that
Mhm.
really set a tone, I would say, in what I like to read and write, if that makes sense. Like Richard Lee
Yeah.
Byers is a good example of, I think of combining those different elements together. So yeah, I totally
Mhm.
agree. She was definitely well read in the Greek tragedies, so that
Yeah.
definitely makes total
Yeah.
sense.
And I
But
was very excited to hear that Guillermo del Toro is actually going to do an adaptation of Frankenstein.
yep,
So
yep,
I'm hoping he stays very faithful to the book. I have no reason to think that he won't, but I'm
yeah,
excited for him to add his own flair into that story.
yeah. I actually saw that I think a week ago in an article, and I was like really, really excited. So I
Yeah,
definitely understand
yeah.
that. Yeah, he's super cool. I agree with you. I think that he'll probably do a good job. I start to think that sometimes people forget that, much like myself being a teacher, I have to adhere to a lot of other people. So the thing I want to
Mhm.
do sometimes really gets overshadowed. So I definitely understand that with things recently that have come out that people were anticipating and were a little
Yeah.
disappointed about. So I think sometimes those people have a good pulse on us, but then, the studios or whoever, maybe not so much. So yeah, not looking at anybody in particular, Amazon. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. So we're gonna go with that second one there. So what is your book Pathlighter about, and how did you come up with this idea?
Yeah, so like I said, the book is called Pathlighter. It
Such a cool
is
cover.
inspired very heavily by Greek mythology, Greek myths. Features a lot of gods, demigods, devils, monsters, older Titan-like beings
Mhm.
in that sense. It's about a our protagonist James. He grows up his whole life in a corrupt theocracy in this desert city called Bone, Boane. Um, and he really has a lot of disdain for the gods. He thinks that they bring nothing but trouble. Living in the theocracy, he sees how corrupt they make things. And despite all of that, he works as a lamplighter for the temple of the gods. Um, so his job is to, light the torches around the city each night. Um, and while he's doing this, he realizes over time that he has a small connection with the flame where he can control its brightness ever so slightly. Um, and a lot of chaos ensues. He runs into other people who have a connection to the gods in this same way. A lot of it is very elemental. The gods have elemental connections, a lot like the Greek gods do. And then he realizes that a lot of these people are also very broken, just like the gods kind of are, and each has their own influences, their own past, their own desires, and they really can't afford to squabble according to those anymore because of some ancient threats that come about. So um, very reminiscent of a lot of Greek mythology, and also includes some Frankenstein type character building in there, where the characters often, are very emotionally and selfishly driven. And then when they realize they make mistakes, they make band-aid solutions that end up making things worse. So
Which is way more exciting for everybody,
yeah,
including
exactly. Who
yourself.
wants
So
everything to resolve, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. Oh man, that's awesome. I have to say, like I said, like I was like last night, I thought I had some extra time, and my son was like, "No, no, you don't."
Yeah.
But at first I did. So I went through like about halfway through chapter one. I have to say, in terms of your prose, I really liked it. Like you were just talking about some of those things. I feel like you set the tone right away, for I don't want to give anything away, but like, for a lot of things that you just talked about. And I feel like you set expectations really well, like right off the bat. And I feel, like sometimes people, it's like you might have to get to page like 50, 35,
Mhm.
50 pages in to be like, oh, I'm going to read this book. And I was like on page, one, and it's like half a page, on Kindle. And I was like, yeah, this is definitely, my type of prose, my type of world building. Like instantly, like, the POV, everything fit together like really, really well. So I thought it was really
Awesome.
awesome.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, I was actually really impressed because I was like, this is, this to me it seemed like you had written 50 books. Just with how the first like chapter was set up. So I'm actually really excited tonight to go on my break and finish up chapter one. So
Well, thank you.
if I have the energy to stop there and go back to some other reads, I probably won't, just to be honest. But I haven't, that's
Yeah.
why I haven't put out my TBR list yet. So if you guys see Rob up there a little bit quicker in the first couple, then you'll know why. But yeah, I was really impressed right away. So I thought you did a really good job setting up
Yeah.
expectations and world building. So
Yeah, thank you so much. I take a lot of inspiration on prose from people like Abercrombie and Sanderson to a lesser extent.
yeah,
I think that their prose is very direct,
yeah,
and they have a way of weaving the lyrical or the more flowery stuff into it so that it doesn't feel like John Steinbeck, where
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
guy grips the door handle and then 10 pages later he opens the door or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no words wasted, while at the same time finding a way to make it a little bit more magical than just a documentary or like a biography or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, totally. Yeah. I think you hit the nail right on the head, just saying. So yeah, it was definitely yeah, if you guys like you were saying, if you like Abercrombie, some Sanderson, I could definitely still I think a little bit more Abercrombie, personally. But yeah, I felt like you did not like every 15 pages I read, I felt like you didn't waste, one word. Like everything was placed really well. I was like, man, when am I gonna be able to do this kind of thing? Like I was really jealous. I was like, oh, like I'm really trying hard to do that myself lately. I feel like I gained a level, but you're definitely above me with that. It was definitely really, really good. I feel like I need to, work more with an editor there. But just for our audience, if you like a really nice flowing, I feel like it flowed really well. I felt like, I was only sitting down for a couple minutes. I'm a fast reader still, but I mean, I think I was only reading for like 3 minutes. I was already like 15 pages in. I mean, it was very, very quick. So and I got
Well,
a,
good.
a
I'm
lot of
glad that.
I got a lot of anticipation out of it, so I'm excited to see
Yeah,
where it goes. So yeah, but I
yeah.
felt like I just for yourself and our audience, I just think like it's a great example of how to hook a reader right away in a particular genre. And I think when you read the blurb, you're like, okay, like he's going around and he's doing these things for his job, but I thought the world building right away, like you inserted so seamlessly, and it ended up I thought it sounded really interesting as a writer and a reader, but I guess with how you expanded on it so quickly from the blurb was done really well. So,
Oh, good.
yeah, it was really cool.
Well, thank you. I will. You mentioned an editor there, and I do have to plug my editors because it didn't start out as no words wasted.
Yeah, yeah,
It from first draft all the way to what you're reading published. It takes a lot. It takes a village. It takes quite a
yeah,
few
yeah, yeah.
people to get it to resemble something that's actually readable. So I have to plug my editors, Claire Ashgrove and Jason Letts.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
got developmental editing from Claire, and Jason gave me some really good copy editing.
Oh,
So
wow.
they definitely helped with that no words wasted,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Abercrombie type prose, and they're part of the reason why it flows so smoothly. So
Oh, that's awesome. You guys clearly make a good team. So, you got me really excited for us the book, and I was like, oh man, book two's gonna be really good too. So, yeah, but yeah, excellent, excellent job. So that's what I always try to tell people, like, trying to find a good team, no matter what you're doing, whether or not it's a co-author, an editor, just anything, cover artists. I think, like you said, it takes a village, audio narrators, same thing. I've been talking to a lot of them recently,
mhm,
try and expand on, knowledge for the market on this channel and my own knowledge and to get, their works and stuff out there. But yeah, definitely. I like how you said it takes a village, particularly in the indie community, right? Because everybody's connected together. So I always tell people when you review a book or an audio book or something for Rob, it's not just you, it's for your other people that have helped, you with that product. So it helps everybody out, in the long run. But yeah, it's really cool.
yeah.
Yeah, it was
Well, yeah,
awesome.
that's the. I mean, the the acknowledgments, I had to put that right in the front of the book
Mm,
too, because I mean, some authors will put their acknowledgments way in the back or something like that.
yeah,
But
yeah,
um, I wanted the acknowledgments to be right up front, especially because it's been such a long book in the making.
yeah, yeah,
Um, that everyone who has helped get the book to where it's at now, um, the book wouldn't be there without them. So they're you know I wanted to put the acknowledgments right away so that
yeah,
they
yeah.
know you are reading this because of these people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree. I actually don't like it when people put acknowledgements in the back. I'm like, oh, like,
Hmm.
and I'm sure that there's a lot of reasons that people do it, but mine's coming right in front. I have a huge list of them, so I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's. Yeah. I'm like, it's not even for anybody else other than those people. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. Definitely should be in the front, and I read them too. I think it's cool to to read
Hmm.
how different people help. Because again, it takes a village, right? Like I have people that have
Yeah.
helped me just to keep writing, or they're like, my buddy checks me all the time. He's like, "How is this book coming? Did you get any writing done today?" And he keeps me honest. So I definitely understand that. He's going right in the front there, so I won't blame you there. So one of my favorite questions for you in particular, because I've ever since I first saw your book pop up on my feed, I just have to know, what type of magic system do you have, and what makes yours unique?
Yeah. It's a very God-driven magic system. Um, I'd like to say that it kind of toes the line between a soft magic system and a hard magic system because it definitely has rules. And I think that that's one of the most fun things about developing a magic system is that it's got to have rules. You have to define clearly what it can do and what it can't do. And what it can't do is actually more interesting than what it can do. Um, and I think that was actually included in Sanderson's laws
Yep.
magic systems.
Yep.
But I really, really wanted um, to really put a like almost like a Full Metal Alchemist spin on classic Greek mythology, Avatar: The Last Airbender, or any type of like elemental magic systems. Um, because in Avatar: The Last Airbender, a lot of the magic system in that just really kind of it seemed to coincide with martial arts and what you
Yeah.
could do physically, like what your
Yep.
body can do physically. Um, but combining that with Full Metal Alchemist, where you're kind of using it at the expense of yourself, and then also trying to put that into a Greek mythology spin, where most of Greek mythology magic is just the gods say that this is how it is, and that's how it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
It developed a pretty unique challenge. And so I'd like to think that my magic system does a good job of dipping a toe into each of those without jumping too far in, and makes it something more my own. But I really think that um, the prospect of coming up with a magic system is something that you should look at quite early because it defines a lot of what your characters can do, and sometimes
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
characters are very defined by their power, and they use it as part of their own personality.
Yeah. Well, I just want to mention because I talk a lot. I'm a history teacher, so I talk a lot about how geography, influences a culture and economy. And then the people, of course, because whatever you have around you and what you're using, right, is what you're going to buy, sell, or use within your culture. A lot of times affects religion, and other things too. So I always think of a magic system the same way, like you said, you got to think of it pretty early. I'm doing like kind of like a Warhammer thing at some point. Can't say why, but I have like, futuristic sci-fi fantasy, like, there's a magic system, in
Mhm.
space essentially. I just love Warhammer. So I want to do something like that with one of my series. So I was like right away, my friend's like, dude, you gotta like really figure out your magic system. So my fantasy stuff, it's a little bit different, but here it's like, you know, you want to fit because that's gonna determine history, that's going to determine different classes, society, especially culture, and probably economy too, and you look at Dune, and with the dust or whatever, the spice, sorry, and I feel like that influences everything, from start to finish. So I think magic a lot of times does the same. So I agree with you. I think that you really got to think about it right off the bat because I always think, and this will be a seminar that I'm going to run actually, and I talked a lot about it with my friend in book club for Malazan Book of the Fallen, where it's like they had these amazing magic powers that you can essentially do whatever. And to me, it seems like there's a lack of technology because of it from the human
Mhm.
side, because they don't need it. Whereas you have some of the other races, better technology, because they've learned to balance. So I think it's an interesting theme. But I always wonder, like if we had magic, we probably wouldn't have science, because
Mhm.
we use science to do things that we can't do. But if you had magic, I just think it would lessen your, scientific ability. But again, that's what you said, right? Like magic, comes right away and kind of roots everything else. So to me, that would just change everything, culture,
Mhm.
economy, religion, stuff like that. So I totally agree with you there on that. Interesting
Yeah,
concept.
and there, you do, I do think it's important to figure out a magic system right away, but there's nowhere on the sliding scale that you necessarily need it to
Good
be at.
point.
There's no point between soft and hard magic system that, it absolutely has to be. It works differently for everybody. I mean, Lord of the
Yeah,
Rings has a very soft magic system. You really have no idea like how Gandalf does the things that he does, or why he does them, or how he got these powers, or anything like that. I mean, if you dig deeper into like the Silmarillion and stuff like that, then you can probably figure out more. But stuff like Lord of the Rings and like Song of Ice and Fire, magic system is also very it's also pretty soft as well. And then you get over into the stuff like Mistborn or Stormlight Archive, the magic systems are often a lot harder and they're more clearly defined.
yeah,
And so it makes a nice dichotomy there where, if you're reading a Stormlight Archive book and then, someone does something with magic that is going to put them in danger because you know so much about the magic system, then that builds tension. But then, if you have someone over in like Song of Ice and Fire that is dealing with mage and you're not exactly sure what the mage can do, that also brings tension. So
yeah,
it's not there's no one right way to do it, and that's what's so
yeah,
nice about fantasy is that the possibilities are endless.
yeah. One of my buddies was listening recently to an episode. I can't remember who I was talking to in the season. He's like, "Why are you like giving Tolkien so much grief?" I was like, "I'm not giving him grief, but it just drives me nuts that you got a guy that can fight a Balrog and win, or at least stand toe to toe with him, but then he's worried about orcs, like if you just take like let's just take the movie Hobbit, where
Hmm.
he's just chilling in the tree with everybody else. I'm like, so you're telling me that that it just doesn't make sense, and I
Hmm.
granted that was the movie, but to me like that part always bugged me, and I love Tolkien. Don't get me wrong, got me
Hmm.
into fantasy, but as a writer and a reader, like not that everything always has to make sense to me. I like some mystery, but like that drove me nuts. It still does. Like class of character, right? You're a level 12 character, let's say. 'Cause I'm a huge D&D fan, Pathfinder,
Hmm.
stuff like that. And you would just assume that if you can take a Balrog, you could take a couple orcs, regardless of their
Yeah.
level or whatever. I don't know. It just always kind of bugged me. So I agree with you. I think that, you really have to, if you're gonna do something like that, I think it just needs to be consistent. And to me, it always kind of drove me nuts because I always felt like in the movies and the books, I just kind of felt like he wasn't very consistent, if that makes sense. And it kind of drives me nuts
It,
with the magic system. So
yeah. It's funny that you mentioned D&D because I also like to, when those inconsistencies come up, sometimes I do like to think of it from a D&D sense, like maybe Gandalf just ran out of spell slots or something,
that's
you know?
that's fair. That
You
actually
know?
that actually Rob, that makes me feel better. That
Yeah.
actually really
Yeah.
makes me feel better. You just like kind of just put like folded a huge wrinkle for me. That actually makes a lot of
Yep.
sense.
Yep. The Witch King shows up. He's about to fight Gandalf, and Gandalf's like, dude, I'm out of spell slots. And then the
Yeah.
DM is like, okay, well, I don't want a TPK right now. So I'll just make the I'll just make the Witch King go somewhere else.
That's awesome. No, you actually make now. I thank you, Rob. I think I can actually sleep at night now. So
Yeah.
I can't wait
Good.
to text my buddy that here in a little bit and be like, "This is what Rob said, and this makes total sense." So it
Yeah.
actually makes me feel a lot better. But
Good.
yeah, that's
I'm glad I
hilarious.
can give you some solace.
It especially helps because I have a child. So now that I sleep better, I'm sure that I'll write a
Yeah.
lot better. I'm gonna put you in my acknowledgments now. Rob put this issue for me to bed, and now I sleep, and now I can write a lot more. So
Yeah, that's
it's
right.
awesome. So speaking of your gods, how big of a role do your gods play in the lives of your characters?
it's kind of a sliding scale again.
Nice.
Because you have characters like James, where he thinks of the gods as just sort of like a nuisance. They're always hanging overhead. They're always around. They permeate every little bit of life, but he can't stand them. He doesn't think that they're good for society or anything like that. He's essentially the form of, I wouldn't even say an atheist, because atheism isn't really, the hatred of religion. It's more just like not really believing in anything.
Yeah,
He in this sense is kind of like the r slash atheist, like anti-theist type person. He doesn't think that the gods are good for anything. Um, but there are other characters, where if you've read through chapter one, there are characters like Samira, who is very devout. She thinks that the gods are paramount to everything that she does in her life. And you have various other people that are in between. Um, and so I wanted it to be a little bit more realistic in the fact that, like, not everyone believes exactly the same. Not everyone believes, that the gods are good necessarily. And, people are going to have disagreements on that, just like they do in real life. And some of those
yeah,
disagreements can be civil, and some of those disagreements might, become a little bit more heated. And it all just kind of depends on the overall personalities of each character. Um, and I wanted it to also reflect Greek mythology in the way that, the gods are very present, but they are not necessarily a reflection of what people want the world to be or what is moral. It's more of a reflection of the world as it is. Because the Greek gods were some terrible people. They were
yeah,
awful.
yeah,
Zeus was an awful dude. The only exception to the rule, or one of the pseudo exceptions to the rule, might be Hades, and that's because people don't really mention him in Greek mythology a whole lot.
yeah,
They thought that mentioning Hades or mentioning any other creatures of the underworld was a good way to get their attention and make them show up. And so,
yeah,
really, all Hades does is just hang out at home, and he doesn't mess with anyone unless anyone messes with him.
yeah.
Um, and the Persephone mythos too. There is
Yep.
problematic stuff there. Compared to Zeus, he's a saint almost.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so
It's so funny. I just because like Percy Jackson is I love the new show. I think they're doing an awesome job,
I haven't seen it
especially with
yet.
the books. Oh my gosh. Yeah. You got to go.
I
Like
know.
I was so impressed. I love those books. I was in a
Mhm,
in like a third grade classroom subbing, and like I literally had nothing to do. Like the teacher was amazing, the kids were amazing, and I was like, "Is there something you want me to do?" Like, and I was young, and she was, just read a book. It's fine, just whatever. And I'm like, okay. So went in back and picked up, book one of Percy Jackson, and I like flew through it that day. I was like, can I borrow this? She goes, yeah, sure. I think I finished within like, 2 days with two jobs, and I was actually in school just doing some extra classes. But I have to say, I think they got the feel of it down. There's just certain shots that they have done where just really impressed me. Like there was one from the last episode where just the shot alone, I was like, "Oh, that is so cool." And I felt like they really had the feel, of the books. And I would
good.
say, personally, for me, from what my perspective of what I, was picturing and different things
Mhm,
and what it felt like, I thought they did a really good job. But it's just interesting because when you're talking about Hades, I was just talking about this where it's fully blanking on which god or goddess I was talking about the other day in class, but it was kind of the same thing, like we're like we were talking about Shiva, right? And being the destroyer and different things, and that's such
mhm,
a I think a not a good translation if that makes sense.
mhm.
Because really, I think death is natural, and I just said I was like,
Yeah.
why do sometimes in their myths or in with Hades, in modern day, I'm like, why do people, attribute that with something bad? And my kids are like, well, we don't want to die, and I'm like, yeah,
Mhm,
totally. So, you have to fight death almost. I said, I think it's a theme
mhm,
rather than, even talking about the actual gods or goddesses themselves. So it just ended up, we had a really cool discussion about it, but they were mentioning it on
mhm,
Percy Jackson and, in Hades. And, if you've read the books, right, you kind of know what they're doing with him and why. So to me, I think it makes total sense what you're saying, and I know
mhm,
I think if you have a really good grasp of that, that knowledge of Greek mythology, like you were saying earlier, I think you just have a lot of really cool. I think that's why people like it so much, right? The stories are
Hmm.
interesting, and the gods aren't perfect. They're more like us, with the being imperfect, and they make mistakes. And like you said, they put band-aids on things. The gods themselves do, right? So of course the heroes
Yeah,
or archetypes are going to too. So yeah, I think that makes total
yeah.
sense. It's really cool.
I think you've got something there with the gods and Band-Aid solutions. That's their trademark. I mean,
Yeah.
even supposedly the one of the wisest, Athena, if she, gets into a sewing contest or a thread weaving contest with, I think the woman's name was Arachne, and Arachne makes a loom that's even more beautiful than hers, and then Athena gets super jealous and like, slashes the loom to ribbons and everything, and then Arachne, unfortunately, commits suicide because she, you know, uh, was just so ashamed by the fact that a god didn't like her tapestry. And then instead of like asking Hades for the soul back, or instead of like doing anything meaningful, Athena just turns her into a spider, and that's how you get Arachne. Like, I don't know.
Well,
I feel like and that's something too that I think that Percy Jackson did so well, that Rick
yep.
Riordan does so well, is he just captures how petty the Greek
Yeah.
gods are.
Well, that's
It
like with Medusa, right? I
obviously.
thought they did a great job. He did a great job with Medusa, and I was like, "There's no way that that's what Athena did to Medusa, being
Mhm.
jealous and everything." And I was like, "Oh, dang," And I totally agree with you. It was, yeah, you really see. I think he did a great job with the pettiness. I definitely agree.
Yeah, yeah, and it's not necessarily, he definitely had to do some things to make it more suitable for YA,
Hmm.
because there's a lot
Hmm.
of there's a lot of Greek
For sure.
mythology that isn't suitable for
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
for younger people. But
Yep.
if you have, if he was able to capture the essence of how petty and how self-centered a lot of the Greek gods are, and how they really don't, you know, they really, even though they're omnipotent and immortal, they still can't see the big picture.
Yep.
I think that is such a testament to, how well researched and how well written his work is,
Yeah.
just to still be able to capture that for a younger audience and to put it in a contemporary setting.
Yep.
Um, and it shows too, in later books, as Percy meets all of the gods, their own levels of grievance with each other and understanding the politics of it all. And again, like we said, bringing it back to Hades, it, just realizing that Hades is a guy, you know
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
um and I especially like Hades' arc throughout the later books, especially
I, I totally agree. Yeah.
as you get into book 5. Um I really enjoy getting to see his character too, because that's the great thing about those books as well, is that the gods are characters.
Yeah.
They
Yeah. Yeah.
all go through their own arcs. It's not something that you see in the foreground. It's something that's they're a background character, and you might get a snippet of them every once in a while, but it
Yeah.
still charts growth throughout that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I actually really like that in the first movie too, with like Nathan Fillion with Hermes. I felt like he's such a good actor where he really
Hmm.
captured, like I felt like he was starting to really capture, the essence of Hermes in the books, with taking responsibility for Luke and, just different things, and that it was, if he had just shown his son some actual love, like I don't know, I thought that, he really brought the character Hermes to life. I like the new actor too. I'm totally blank on who it is, but I like him a lot too. He hasn't gotten a lot of screen time yet. But I hope that, he's
Yeah.
able to capture it as well as Nathan Fillion did. But yeah, I think they're doing a really good job. But I agree with you. I think also too there's an aspect where Rick Riordan like is teaching you Greek
Hmm.
mythology really well, I think. Like you said, he brings it down to a YA level, but I was just so interested after everything, every encounter and stuff. I was looking stuff up left and right, and like I had just gotten done with my history degree, um, and I was, pretty well versed, but I was just like poring over stuff, and it really got myself interested. And I can't tell you how many kids I've talked to. Like that's still like people's, favorite series. I have a bunch of high school kids, and they still love it. So like next year for sophomores, like in
Hmm.
English class or freshmen, trying to do kind of like a joint effort sort of thing and have them read the first book, and do some different things. And then in my
hmm
class, we'll go over all the tragedies and the heroes and stuff like that. But it's just so cool to, as a history teacher,
Yeah.
I've taught English before too, to have an author that gets so many people interested, in history or mythology. I just
hmm
there's so many times people will tell me, "Oh yeah, this is the reason I started to read." And I'm like, that's just really cool. And I think as an author, I'm
Yeah.
like, I want to do that, like for
Yeah.
somebody,
Yeah.
who's interested in the genre or, reading in general. So yeah.
Mhm. That's something you mentioned too, is that it's so nuts that um, Riordan was able to uh, tell a compelling story and world build and have Greek mythology set in, modern times in like New York City or the United States, and teach about Greek mythology all at the same time without bloating the story or slowing down the pacing
Yeah.
or anything.
Yeah, like you would think he would have to be like it'd be a chonker, like each book would be,
Yeah.
and he like talk about not wasting words. I mean,
hmm
like same thing. I think a lot of people don't give him credit. Like his later books are bigger.
hmm
I have them, haven't gotten to read them yet.
Yeah.
But I just keep thinking like, I can't wait for my son to get older, and need to at least be able to read them to him, and
hmm
because he does so many different things. Like talk about, my friend the other day we were talking and he's like, I feel like I'm doing so many different things with my book, like spinning all these plates. And we were talking about that. I'm like, he does such a great job. Some people are like, well, I'm gonna do this one thing and do it really well. I'm like, I feel like he just
hmm
like I spin plates really well and do all these things at one time, so I'm gonna do that. So I give him a lot of credit. I everything I've read of him, even the like the Red Pyramid and like those books, I mean,
hmm
those are also really stellar, switching to Egyptian
Yeah.
mythology stuff. So I think that's I was surprised, with the first book. I wasn't sure, if it was gonna have the same taste and flavor, but he totally did it. So I give
hmm
him a lot of props. One day, maybe, right? Like that's what you try to aspire to. But yeah, super cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So we're gonna go with our next one. That was a great answer, by the way.
hmm
Which character was the most challenging to write and why?
Oh,
Which one didn't listen to you, Rob?
uh, yeah. I um I think one of the characters, I don't believe you've met them yet, but there's a character named Riga. Um, and she, I think, was my most difficult to write. For reasons that are a little spoilery, so I'm not going to get into them. But it just she presented a challenge where it took me a little while and a couple revisions to actually get her arc in Pathlighter right. And luckily, that kind of informed the trajectory that she goes on for book 2 and 3 of the trilogy. Um, but this first book for her was very tricky, and I'm glad that it worked out. I'm glad that Claire and Jason were patient with me on me getting this arc completely figured out. Um, but she's not like the other characters. She very much she very much follows a different trajectory. Um, and I'm excited to see where it goes. Even though, I'm the author and I'm that's and I'm writing how where she's supposed to go. There's still some discovery in there.
Yeah, yeah,
So I can't wait to hear your thoughts on her when you get to her, but especially toward the end of the book. But yeah, I'd say that she was my most difficult character to write, but it was a fun difficult. It wasn't like
yeah,
like tearing my hair out difficult.
yeah. I totally get that. I have like my fantasy book. People keep asking me, "Oh, it sounds cool." I have these like two thieves, and they do this like they're in this heist for a reason, and they're like young thieves. They're trying to get into the guild, and then there's this like other merchant woman who is like a daughter and she's trying to save her father essentially. Um, and then she's like, oh, she discovers these items and she's like, oh, if I just do this, according to legend, I can do whatever I want and I can, whatever. And then craziness ensues. But she has
hmm
been so hard because at first she turned out to be a good guy. Then she was a bad guy, and now I'm like, she's not really either one. She's just trying to, do this thing. So I totally get it. I've rewritten her like her arc 3 or 4 times, and I'm still
hmm
not quite there. I know what I want to do, but I've just been having trouble doing it. But like saying, I get it. Like she's totally different flavor than everybody else, and she almost has her own story in the story. She kind of cross paths, and
hmm
things happen. So I totally get it. And yeah, I'm like, well, how am I going to do this for book 2 and 3? So I totally
hmm
understand that. Sometimes the characters just don't listen to you when
Yeah.
they
And
do their own
sometimes it just
thing.
takes a little bit before they click. It's
Yeah,
not,
yeah,
it's not an instantaneous thing. Like James for this book took a little bit for me, before he clicked as well.
mm,
There are some characters that were like right away, I'm like, okay, that's how they're going to be. And then it was smooth sailing from there. But there were some where it was just, it took a little bit to figure them out.
yeah,
It's like just navigating any like person. It's like getting to
I
know any
agree.
other
Yeah.
person.
Yep.
Um, One really nice thing that I found helped when I was writing out these characters was I did kind of like a biographical prompt for their backstory.
Oh, interesting.
So, like if I were writing James's backstory, I would use it in the first person, like I grew up in this place and I lived with this like this person. This was my family. This is, you know, and that really helped me to understand the personality and the mindset of each of the characters. And I did that for all of them. I did that for Ryga, who I mentioned. I did that for James and the people he gets to know. I did that for the villains. So I think that that was something that really, really helped with the first book.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's something that I'll do for characters that are introduced in the second and third books as well. And it might even be something that I do for returning characters for books 2 and 3 as well, just to, you know, get a just have like a nice exercise to get a feel for what their mindset is going into
Yeah.
the story.
I just think that's so interesting because you kind of do the Brandon Sanderson thing, but he did just like a summary of what's going on. So I feel like you take that too. I feel like I tried that his method, and it just didn't work for me. I find it's just better if I just go in the story and then do that.
hmm
And then maybe sometimes do like a summary, like he does, like a page or two on a person or something. But I'm gonna try what you're saying though, kind of like a journal entry or a conversation or something from their point of view. I think that
Yeah.
personally would help me a lot more than just writing a summary because I don't really know, right? But if
hmm
I'm writing from their perspectives, because that's what I'm trying to do, right, is trying to get
hmm
into their head or something. So I think that is a really cool exercise. I haven't heard anybody doing that. So this is actually why I
Yeah.
do the podcast. So I'm definitely going to try that out before my writing session tonight for a character I'm having trouble with. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. It helped with my character relationships too. If I wanted
That's
to,
cool.
describing in the third person how one character feels about another character can be difficult. And so maybe just writing out like I think, that this person is a jerk and I don't like
Genius.
them because of these reasons and stuff like that.
Yeah,
That,
yeah.
I think that was also beneficial.
Makes total sense. Well, don't worry, you'll be in my acknowledgments. I'll put you in there for that. Be like, Rob solved this problem for me. Now, on top of being able to sleep, Rob solved this problem for this
Yeah.
character. So I think that's a great exercise. It's so cool being a podcaster because I've picked up so many, different things from people, and some I've tried a lot. Some have worked,
hmm
some haven't. So, but it's always interesting. Some history teachers always talk about cultural diffusion, and I try to talk to new authors all the time. They message me or email me, especially debuts. This is a journeyman's podcast, so it's people like you and myself, who are just getting out there and working together, to try and figure out the best things that work for everybody or yourself. And it's just always so cool to get to share those kind of things because somebody will get a hold of me and be like, "Hey, I tried what Rob said, and now I'm done with book one or book two or something like that."
That's
So I
awesome.
think that's really cool. So I'm definitely gonna try both those out this
Yeah.
evening. I have a character that's just kind of stuck on. So I think those two
hmm
exercises will actually help me out a lot, particularly the relationship one. So I think it's really cool.
Yeah. And there's tons of like writing exercises that I've like looked up and they didn't necessarily work, and there are some that did. But I think that writing exercises are good in that sense because, I wrote this first book over the course of 10 years or more. And then, that was like the YA, like I'm not really sure what I'm doing version. And then I scrapped it and rewrote this version. And then there's still editing and stuff on top of that that I had to do. But that's still, there was a large gap in between when I actually wrote this between, like when I started book two. And so going back to those writing exercises, I think is has been important for me because, when you take a break from writing to like work on all the other stuff for your book or when life takes a front seat,
Mhm.
you aren't, in that flow as often. And
Yeah.
so something that I noticed when I started draft one of book two was that I felt like my prose, for the lack of a word, was like a little dumber. Like
Mm.
it just
No, that makes
didn't
sense. Yeah.
flow the same way,
Yep.
or it didn't hit exactly as the
Yeah.
prose for the first book had. And so doing those writing exercises and reading more consistently as well, I think really helps. I think Stephen King in like On Writing said something along the lines of, how can you expect to be a good writer if you don't also read with
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
frequency?
Yep.
Um, so writing exercises, reading frequently, I think that's something that's been really, really helpful, between the end of writing book one and
Yeah.
being where I am now.
Well, I totally agree with you. I mean, I'm a coach, so I tell kids all the time, I'm like, if you want to be the best volleyball player, you got to watch volleyball. You know, when I'm in season and
Yeah.
even after, when the college season's going, I took a break this year, but like I still watched a lot of volleyball. I watched all the videos. I watched,
Hmm.
again, cultural diffusion, right? I just learned a lot, and like just I would say just from your page one, I was like, okay, like particularly I have this urban fantasy I'm trying to get out by the end of the year. And I'm like, yeah, like your type of prose is exactly what I'm like aiming for, if that makes sense,
Hmm.
with this book. So I learned a lot last night just reading the first half of your chapter. You know what I mean? As like a writer. And I was like, oh, this is the flavor I want, which is kind of cool because whoever I get to edit it, I can be like, hey, can you just check out the first chapter of Rob's book? This is the
Hmm.
kind of flavor I want. Like this is what I'm trying to do, trying
Yeah.
to, I'm trying to insert world building right away, expectations, get you to know the character really quickly. I just felt like we matched up really well with, that kind of thing. And I feel like the goal was the same. So I totally agree with you. I've been reading a lot of different books from a lot of different authors, and it's hard.
Hmm.
It's hard, right? Because
Yeah.
I have a kid. I'm trying to write consistently. I'm doing this, but it's like my friend is like, man, you've been reading a lot. I'm like, yeah, but it's been helping me write. So I totally agree because I want to
Hmm.
be a good writer, right? So I have to try and read as much as possible. So I totally agree with you when I'm doing martial arts, jujitsu. I watch jujitsu all the time, I think you just
Hmm.
have to immerse yourself in whatever you want to be good at and, really listen to the people that are doing things really well, that way you're picking up things that you can do really well. So I totally
Hmm.
agree with you. I think that makes total sense. If I'm not reading, then I'm usually not writing a lot. So.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of the same for me. And I mean, it gets difficult. It gets difficult to read consistently. It gets difficult to write consistently. You got to actually like schedule out time
Yeah.
to read. And
Yep.
it's hard sometimes because sometimes you may really just like, you may really not be into reading at the time. Like maybe something's
Yeah.
happening at
Yep.
work and you're not in the right headspace, but words read or words written are still, important.
Yep.
And the nice thing about, writing is that if you don't like the words, you can come back to them later.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I have three projects I'm working on at the same time because if I'll plow forward with one, if I get stuck, then I'll go to the other
Hmm.
one and I'll plow forward if I need to go back. So it's like at least I might be going slower than some other people, but at least I'm always moving forward. I think of inches,
Hmm.
a couple inches. Again, I am a coach. A couple inches. Eventually, every day you keep going. Eventually, you'll get to 100 yards and score a touchdown. And I think that
Yeah.
if you get any words down, I have a couple things I'm working on where it's like I worked consistently, and I'm kind of the same thing as you. Like I'm around the 25,000 word mark or something like that. It's kind of garbage, but it's still, it's still a draft.
Hmm.
I'll just kind of go back and forth. But I agree. I think anytime I tell people all the time, like anytime you can just get something down. 2 days ago, I wrote three and a half minutes. I got words down. I consider that a
Hmm.
successful day. So trying to get 100 hours from like a year from the day after my birthday. So I was really struggling to write with our schedule, and we had a lot of stuff happen. My wife and my son, and people were sick, and all sorts of stuff. My wife broke her foot twice, so it just made things hard for her. So
Hmm.
time was kind of gone, so I was just trying to do 15 minutes a day. And I was looking at, how fast I write in 15 minutes. I'm like, even if my son sleeps and then I do 15 minutes a day, it's like I could still get 100,000 words out, per year, which is still a book and a half, or a book and a quarter, which is still better
Hmm.
than nothing. So that's really what I've been doing. And I'm kind of a little bit below hourly, I would say, from that goal, but my words have been increased because I'm getting used to the flow, like you said, like I'm getting more out. So it's crazy that I'm writing for less time, but my
Yeah.
output has been a lot greater. So 'cause I'm just getting used to
Yeah.
the mindset and like you said, the flow. Like I kind of have been training myself to pause and being able to immerse myself back into that flow of that river a lot quicker. It's taken a lot of time,
Mhm.
but I think like you're saying like I just think consistency really is key. And you listen to a lot of people, and I think like Nicholas Ames said that on Adrian's podcast. Mike Fletcher and I just talked about that in our recent episode that's coming out soon. And I just think, just getting your butt in the seat or wherever you're at and just, getting words down. Eventually, words are words. You can fix them later, like you said. So I think that makes total
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love this question. Somebody gave it to me a while back, and they kind of asked me, and I was like, "Oh, that's such a good question for the podcast." So, if you could meet any character from your book and ask them one question, what would it be and why?
Yeah, I know. I saw this question when you sent it to me, and I was stumped. I was like, wow, that's so good. Um,
It's not me. I took it from somebody that was listening, and a listener,
no,
so
no, no.
I have to do that. So,
No, it's a fantastic question. I absolutely love it. I mean, there's different ways that like I can take this as well. I can definitely like ask a character like a really surface level, like, you know, totally um, not important or trivial question.
yeah, yeah. What's your
Or
favorite
I can
color?
ask someone a really important question.
Yeah.
So with the important question, it's a character that I don't think you've met yet. His name is Dor. And I would probably ask him, what is your most treasured memory?
Ooh, that's a good
Um,
one.
Yep, and that'll gain significance as you read throughout the book.
Oh,
But
cool.
then for another character, it's also a character that pops up later. Her name is Ariel, and um, I would probably ask, why do you like to drink gin? Because I
Mhm.
hate it. I absolutely hate gin.
Oh yeah, not a big fan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
cool.
I think that gin tastes like if you were to take like a alcohol wipe or something like that and to
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah,
like
yeah,
lick
yeah.
it, like that's it
Yeah,
just it doesn't hold any value for me. I'm
yeah,
more of
yeah,
a bourbon guy. But yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah.
think those are the two questions I would ask. Dor, what is your most treasured memory? And Ariel, why do you drink gin?
That's interesting. Those are both great answers.
Mhm.
That's awesome. Thank you to our listener who he didn't want to be named, but
Yeah.
thank you for giving us that question. I've had a lot of really cool answers, so that's a really good answer.
Yeah, thank you. That
So,
was a great question.
I know, right? So what is one piece of advice you could give someone when it comes to releasing their first novel or book?
Yeah. There are there's so many things. Uh,
All right, you can do
I
do a couple. That's fine.
Yeah, I think that the main thing would be don't be afraid to reach out to somebody. I mean, the
I
very
agree.
the very worst thing that anyone could say is no.
Yeah,
And reaching out to people is how I've gotten a lot of like really great connections within the indie community. Um, I've reached out to Kay's Hidden Shelf and Christopher Navo and talked with Bird Strubble and Quinn over at Silverstones and
neat.
a ton of other people. Um, Javier Giametti from Jam Reads.
Oh, cool.
Um, and reaching out to these people was, how I got this book into their hands, and how I've gotten some of the advice or the buzz that it's gotten. Reaching out to other authors and asking them questions. I remember pretty early on into the my social media, I reached out to Andy Peliquin to ask a couple
Oh,
questions
Andy's
about.
awesome. He's awesome.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's great. I reached out to him about maps and like asked him about maps, and
Oh,
you'll
that's
notice
cool.
that this book doesn't have a map at the beginning, but maps aren't necessarily like required. They're more of a flavor thing, and so kind of talking with him back and forth about the pros and cons of maps and stuff like that, I think really helped me out. Um, and I think another piece of advice would just be, don't be afraid to like do more research. You'll know when you're ready.
No, those are both great. I can't wait to. I was so excited because Andy started talking to me on Instagram a while back, and we were chatting about different books and stuff. And he like asked me, he's like, "Have you read this?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's pretty cool, you know." And so we've been, throwing recommendations back and forth, and it just kind of was so funny that I had said to Adrian, I was like, he's like, who's somebody you're trying to interview recently, and it just hasn't worked out with your schedule, with your family and stuff, and work. I was like, oh, Andy Peliquin's definitely up there. So
Hmm.
it was cool because like behind the scenes, he was like, okay, yeah, we're gonna meet Andy. That way I can introduce you guys, like in person or meet, then you guys can go do your interview later. So I was like, that was really cool of him. So Andy and I are trying to bring all the beard into
Yeah.
our episode. So I'm like really excited for that. And then after that, I'll have Adrian, and then I'm hoping MJ and I can connect again because I haven't connected with her since season one on here. I had a
Mhm.
two-part episode with her. If anybody has a chance, absolutely awesome. Awesome. Her mind and how it works with different things. I had so many notes after those two episodes. I mean, it was crazy. So I was so excited to see that, she was, heading on to the SSF Addicts podcast with him. But yeah, Andy's awesome. So I agree with you though. Like there's so many people where like Dirk Ashton helped me out, Mike Fletcher, Jed Hearn, Rob Hayes, Felix helped me out too. I asked him about some very simple things for art. He goes, don't pay thousands of dollars for this. He goes, go to, these places
Mhm.
and put together these graphics. It'll cost you like $10. So he's always awesome. So yeah, I totally agree. Like Paul S. Kemp from Forgotten Realms, Egil and Nick series is amazing. He saved me from a vanity press years ago that
Mhm.
end up getting sued for stuff. So
Oh
luckily, I
wow.
just happened to be Facebook friends with him. He saved me probably like $5,000, if not more, and having to go to court and
Yeah.
stuff. So I totally agree with you. I mean,
Mhm.
everybody that I've met's been really cool. Traditional or indie, but I
Mhm.
love indie community. I feel like I've not heard one person say no. People always ask me for things, and if I can't help them right away, I send them to someone else, or try to
Mhm.
get back to them later, or send them to our Facebook podcast group. There's a lot of people, that do interviews in there and other podcasts and stuff. So I totally
Yeah.
agree. If
Yeah.
anybody in the audience needs something, yes, I'm busy, but I'll always respond to you. It might not be, within the hour or the day, but I will get
Mhm.
back to you. So, or I will send you to somebody who can help if I can't help. So it's a nice little plug for
Yeah.
the community there. So I totally agree with you there.
Yeah, and there's never a person that you like if you feel strongly about like maybe reaching out to somebody, reach out to them. I mean, I reached out to like pretty big names in the indie community. Like I reached out to like Daniel Green and
Oh, cool.
I don't know if Jenna Moresi, I reached out to her as well.
Hmm.
Um, just to see, to put out some feelers, see if they were interested in like reading
Yeah,
it. I had some arcs or something like that that,
yeah,
see, would you like one or something like that.
yeah, yeah,
And they, I did get responses from them like, I'm sorry, I'm too busy or something like that. But it's always worth reaching out. And I don't fault anyone for being too busy. Everyone's busy.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and, you know, even if someone is busy, they'd be like, I love the idea for it. I'd love to read it at like a different time or something
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
that. Um, and then there's also people in the indie community who will reach out to you as well if you
Yep.
if you put yourself out there. Beard of Darkness, Matt from Beard of Darkness, was one of the first people to take a chance on my book,
Oh,
and
cool.
set up an interview with him, and he wrote a review for Sci-Fi Fanfi Addict or something like that.
Yeah,
Um, and it's just been a wonderful thing to have that connection. He's a great guy.
well, that's awesome. So we're just kind of wrapping up on time, so I just want to make sure we get to that last one for you. So, do you have any news, updates, or current projects you can share with us?
Yeah, so I'm currently working on book two of the Pathfighter trilogy. Working title, wrong answers only. I'm not exactly sure what the working title should be. I have a pretty good idea of what the actual title will be, but I like working titles. They're fun
Hmm.
to come up with. Or I think the
Yeah, yeah.
best one I heard was it's Pathin time,
I like
um,
that.
or Pathlighter 2, the Pathining. So
That's cool.
um, but I think that's my only update right now. I did start work on a secret novella project
Oh,
that's going to be
cool.
standalone from the Pathlighter trilogy. I keep saying that I'm going to like treat a single month like a NaNoWriMo and just
Yeah,
finish that novella, but it's weird. Every time I try and start that, I just get sucked back into
I
Pathlighter.
hear
It's like
that.
I just love these characters too much.
Yeah,
It's difficult.
yeah, that's
Um,
fair.
but I've got those, and then also just working on collaboration projects with my author group, the Break-ins, um, and then trying to get the book sold in more indie bookstores. this great bookstore from my hometown of Fort Dodge, Iowa, the Green Dragon Bookshop. Um, they are stocking my book, and then they also gave me a nice little pamphlet of a roadmap of indie bookstores across the Midwest,
Oh, that's
United
cool.
States. So it's just kind of a nice little map for me to circle a store and then say, hey, reach out to them, and then if they say no, then I cross that off, or different things. But that's most of the things I've got in the works right now.
Cool. Well, that's awesome. Well, Rob, I want to thank you for coming on. It was really awesome. I'm excited to read your book. As soon as I finish and throw my review up, I'll let you know and send you the links. I just want to remind our audience anywhere that you find this podcast, either watching or listening, you can find Rob's books and social links in the description. So please make sure you click on them and please make sure you review his book. That way, it can be seen by more people. But Rob, thank you so much for coming out. If there's anything else I can do in the meantime, like I said before we started, just let me know and I'll help you as best I can, my friend.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
Yeah, yeah, anytime. Well, I look forward to seeing you on Instagram, my friend. And like I said, if you need anything, just
Yeah,
let me know. All right. I hope you have a good rest of the day.
yeah, you as well. Stay warm.
Yeah, thanks, man. I'll see you later.
Yep, see ya.
Bye.